I love being part of the front line. I love being a part of Takanini. I grew up in East Auckland. I have lived through multiple broken homes. I contain the ethnicities of Niue, Tonga, of England, of Te Atiawa Ngāti Raukawa. I'm proud of every single one of my links. I love both my parents. I love the fact that I've got a wife who is of Chinese ethnicity. I eat mostly Chinese food, proper Chinese food. My kids are multiple ethnicities. And that's one of the wonderful things about Takanini. There's such an amazing diversity here. And we know what we need to have done in Takanini. We know because we understand the people, the cultures, the very environment that it is. So this year, put your vote towards the front line, those who are in the community, working in the community. Party vote New Conservative, vote Elliot Ikilei for Takanini.
Whakalofa atu, good evening. Thank you so much for tuning in, for coming along in. It's just wonderful to have you here. So as we have advertised tonight, we are actually going to be talking about a subject that is very topical, and it is very much about what Labour has been pushing very heavily so far. So it is, of course, the real push around about this conversion therapy. And yes, it's been brought out as a very scary element. It's been given a very freaky sort of name and decision-making processes around that. So we are very much concerned with how Labour has been doing it, but we don't know really about what is gay conversion therapy. Is it shock treatment? Is it culty groups? Is it smashing you out? Is it starving you until you decide to roll on something? I mean, what is it? So, in terms of finding out the real deal as to what actually all of this is going on, I don't know enough. And so what we need to do is to have someone on who does know things. Now, it's very important to allow our good, great, special guest to come on and have a chat. And you probably won't know who this is. He's a great guy, and we had a great chat about various things in the area. So, without further ado, I would like to present to you, Bro. Good evening, brother. How are you?
Yo, what's up, man? How's it going?
Good. So thank you so much for coming on board. Thank you so much for being with us. It's really important to be able to know what's going on. And already we've got some great comments coming up. So there are a lot of people who are really interested in this subject. So first and foremost, what can you tell us without identifying yourself? What can you tell us about yourself and perhaps a little bit about your journey?
So, I spent a lot of time growing up in South Auckland and from Tackers as well. Probably given away too much already. And now I live out west. But yeah, no, I also have a degree from the University of Auckland. So I won't say any more, but I think it doesn't really matter. I mean, in the end, you got to look at what I say and think about the ideas I'm presenting and what I'm saying about what New Zealand's doing and make up your own mind. And I think it's pretty clear what's going on given what's being presented in the media and the sort of simplistic nature with which Labour's talking about it and what's going on over in Australia already as well on the same subject. So for me personally, I have a sibling who is gay, and I have struggled a decent amount with same-sex attraction throughout my life. I understand all of the stuff that people are going through within the Christian community with respect to a whole bunch of ignorant church groups, sort of not really even knowing how to speak about the terminology properly, people from the other side who oppose Christian perspectives and don't really know much about what Christianity actually teaches, and pretty much really interested to just put on those few minor cult groups who are like a family of 30 people, Westboro Baptist Church, I'm sure you've all heard of them, or the equivalent of what's here in New Zealand, and basically present them as New Zealanders, or present them as what Christianity is, or what faith is, or what religion is. And yeah, basically, I've spent a fair amount of time dealing with or at least being aware of and not wanting to share anything about my same-sex attraction within Christian communities or within relatively ignorant Christian communities because of the ignorant things I know they'll say. and also struggling to really find anyone to talk to, because I'm not interested in talking to a non-Christian person who's just going to tell me, oh, it's okay, bro, like just be gay, or just have these feelings, or just don't worry about it, or that group's like got it all wrong. And so, you know, you end up not wanting to talk to anyone because you think that they're either going to be ignorant and say dumb stuff, or they're going to be like, they're going to pretend to care, but they're ignorant as well. And then they're just going to say, oh, just be you, or just do whatever, right? They're not actually going to engage with you and have a conversation with you and research the stuff with you. They're not going to try and figure it out with you. And so they're no help either. And yeah.
So right. So you are ex-Southsider. You're now on the west side, which is great to hear. You know, I'm an Eastsider who ended up going to the south side, and you've got a degree. Now, you mentioned that you have had same-sex attraction before. Is that something that you carry nowadays, or is there a bit of a difference nowadays? Is that okay to ask?
Yeah. Well, because you can't see my face, and I've kind of just started like telling people about my journey as well, anyway, in public. But yeah, no, I struggled my whole life with same-sex attraction, and I wouldn't even admit it to myself at the time. You know, it's typical sort of experience of, you know, a homosexual thought would come up in my brain, and I'd be like, oh, that's sick, oh, gross. And I would have to tell myself this in order to try and deter myself from thinking about it, because it's the only thing I could possibly grasp onto, because I didn't want to have this experience. The reality is that people who have same-sex attraction, it results in all kinds of ways. I'm not going to say that it results in a specific kind of way for every single type of person, but I do believe that there's plenty of research out there that shows that it can develop, or is in relation to many nurtured aspects of one's life or experiences of one's life. But yeah, it does seem to be that people have same-sex attraction involuntarily very, very often, and they prefer not to have it because it is difficult, particularly in the male demographic as well. My understanding, particularly from my sibling who is pretty much gay, or in that way, said that, you know, she talked to people, guys who talk about the reality of homosexuality in the male demographic, where it's super, super promiscuous, and it's actually quite hard to have a monogamous relationship. And for Christians, that's extremely important. Christianity teaches not that there's a thing that everyone is not interested in talking about. The media is not interested in talking about it. And that is that it's not a sin or something that you're a fault or evil for having same-sex attraction. That's often something that's involuntary. And so there's the people who are for this legislation that Labour's pushing will basically paint this picture that, oh, they'll ask stupid questions like, oh, Christians think that homosexuality is wrong and evil, right? You think homosexuals are going to hell. You think that homosexuals are evil, right? And they try to push that idea, but that's just a complete joke. It's like, actually, no, that's not what Christianity teaches. And you're probably only talking to an ignorant person who doesn't know how to respond to you. There are plenty of people who can respond to you. If you did 5 seconds of research on the internet, you'd be able to find them and you could interview them. But no, you want to talk to the people who don't know much about it, or who are frustrated with, you know. Sorry, I ran a lot.
No, that's great. So let's get to it. What is this conversion therapy that Labour and Tamati Coffee especially seems to be pronouncing, and some of those young Labour, young Nat, young Green people are pushing to have banned? What is conversion therapy? Is it a real thing at all?
Well, gay conversion therapy is a slogan that's presented by these people who want to basically paint everyone in the same camp. And there was a documentary that was done by Sunday, by One News, not too long ago, I think this year, about gay conversion therapy in New Zealand. Now, if there was anything like extremely bad, like some of the aversion therapies performed by the non-religious, non-secular psychiatrists in the 50s and 70s, they did stuff like shock treatment. They did other kinds of things to try and make you have negative feelings associated with thoughts or whatnot, to try and make you not want to think about it or not desire those things anymore. That stuff was practiced ages ago by all kinds of atheistic psychiatrists, and that stuff doesn't happen anymore. But gay conversion therapy is associated with that kind of treatment, that kind of coercive, or we have some method that's going to make you this or that, right? That doesn't exist in New Zealand. And if you actually look at the psychological industry, clinical psychologists know that there are hundreds of different types of counseling methodologies, and they all have different names and different theories and different ways of helping someone work through thoughts in their head. And the reality is that counseling really is just talking to somebody that knows a little bit about your situation, can help you navigate your own thoughts. A lot of the time, it's like nearly all of counseling is different versions of that. And the idea that there's one methodology that can achieve something in all people in some kind of scientific method is ridiculous. That doesn't exist in psychology. And so when you get these people pushing this idea that, they call up someone who's trying to help people with an unwanted same-sex desire and how to manage it or how to deal with it or how to have a heterosexual marriage or whatever they're trying to achieve. Someone who's willing to talk with them about it and try and help them with it. They go, so you provide gay conversion therapy. And so how does that work? Tell us how that works. As if then they've got to explain their method and then try and prove how that changes people from being gay. And it's like, that's ridiculous. In psychiatry, that doesn't work like that.
So what I'm hearing is that there is no shock therapy. There is no...
Well, if it was on there, you'd think it'd be in the media, right? If it did exist, they would have...
Great point. And you're right. They would have thrown up on every news channel. It would have been blowing up the spot. It would have been going all over the place. But we've never seen this idea of shock therapy. But this is a narrative that I've heard as someone who doesn't know much about this topic at all. So it's really good to hear you sort of discuss the idea around that idea of atheistic, secular type of social scientists in the 50s, 60s, how they were engaging in these horrible experiments. Yeah, incredibly scary sort of stuff. So, and that's what's been going on. So what you're saying is that when Labour has been shoving out this term gay conversion therapy, would it be right to say that they actually don't know what they're talking about, that they're just throwing out some random word that just sounds scary, but there's nothing there?
I'm sure that they would... you can't say stuff like they don't know what they're talking about, right? It's quite, they probably don't, but at the same time, it's like, they're using such a vague term that what does that even mean? My impression is that gay conversion therapy in the way that it's used in that Sunday program is that it's anything with the intent of helping someone possibly changing their sexual desires, right? If you have any intent and try to counsel someone on that, you are gay conversion therapy. But conversion, the word conversion is even like a tasteless word in our language anyway. It has connotations of coercion. It has connotations of you will change, something that will work. It's, and no one who even is remotely successful at it. I know a counseling service that is quite successful and has had only success stories, and they don't have anyone who hates them or is presenting bad stories about them because of their experiences with them. And they've had countless
people. And that's New Zealand?
In New Zealand, and I won't name them because I don't have permission to name them, and they don't consider themselves able to convert you. They say it's possible to change, yes, because there are hundreds of people around the world, even in Australia and in New Zealand, people in New Zealand who have talk about having significant change. It might not be from hardcore exclusively homosexual to hardcore exclusively heterosexuality. Yeah, obviously it's not going to be like that. But, people have had significant change, and I had significant change in what I was struggling with. Before, I would suppress any notion that what my thoughts were or my feelings or urges were in any way related to homosexual attraction. And it wasn't until I heard a pretty prominent speaker talking about the realities of research that's disproven this born gay idea. Plenty of research has disproven that, by the way. This idea that... that and the idea that Christianity doesn't teach that having same-sex attraction makes you evil or a sinner and going to hell. Like, that's a joke. And when I realized that there were actually people that existed out there who understood the scriptures the way that I understood them and understood and was able to actually talk about the subject reasonably, I suddenly was able to admit the fact that I struggled with same-sex attraction my whole life, because I wasn't even willing to admit that to myself because I was so afraid of it. And actually, I struggled with pornography for a significant amount of time because And part of that struggle was sort of like a subconscious, I felt it and I would even sort of think it, but I wouldn't acknowledge it because I couldn't bear to acknowledge the idea that I had same-sex attraction. But I would want to turn to pornography at times to try and affirm a sense of heterosexual attraction and to try and strengthen that in myself, because I didn't want to have to struggle with homosexual attractions that I didn't want to have. And I know for a fact that my sibling is interested in it, wishes that they didn't have this in themselves, and they would want the ability to talk to people about it and to explore different avenues. And this legislation that Labour is most certainly going to put through in a very similar way to what Australia is doing is going to make it illegal for my sibling to look into any kind of help or talk to anybody about getting help.
So you're saying that you're not talking about those who are heterosexual at that point. Are you referring to actually those who are in our LGBTQIA plus family, those of us who do have same-sex attractions? Are you saying that this law will actually shut down their rights and their free speech or their ability to even engage in some discussion?
Of course. Basically, this is one part of the LGBT community making it illegal for the other part of the LGBT community to be able to look for their own exploration or find a way to do something they don't like about themselves. And it's such a contradiction and hypocrisy of Labour, because Labour's I'm sure all of Labour and all of the people who are pushing this idea of legislating against gay conversion therapy would say, oh, well, it's perfectly fine that if you feel like you want to try and change your sex, then you can go and cut your genitalia off, a permanent change, and it will never be able to be fixed because you have this feeling that you want to explore different therapies, and that's totally fine. But you take this one, and apparently, no, it's not okay to go and explore different types of therapies to try and change something about yourself, which you don't like. Right? Like, people don't like their genitalia, that's why they cut them off. People don't like their same-sex attraction, or don't like that they feel like a woman when they feel like when they're a man or whatever, and they're confused. They want to be able to talk to someone about helping them work through something they don't like about themselves. And Labour wants to be like, no, you can't do that. And they're just full of it. It's like, and it's kind of, I understand it. Like, it's not, it's like, I understand the feeling of, stop telling all these people that what they have or who they are is bad and wrong, right? Like, I can understand that feeling, and that's where it's coming from. But nobody's going around telling them that what they are and who they are is bad and wrong. Nobody's doing that. The people who are doing that are the people who are trying to slander others who say, like, a more nuanced version of reality, which is that Christians and other religions, many other religions, all believe that, you know, the way that you will flourish in this life as a human being in a maximal way, in the most best way you possibly can, is in a heterosexual, monogamous, committed relationship. And there's lots and lots and lots of people who believe this. And if there's any way in which they can help you move towards that direction, they will. And then Labour comes along and says, well, no, those people are telling everybody that if you have same-sex attraction, you're evil and wrong and bad and going to hell, and you shouldn't have these feelings and you should suppress them and all this. And that's just not happening.
So I can, it definitely sounds quite ideologically authoritarian in a sense, or, you know, oddly enough, a bit of a sect who's teemingly to shut down a lot of the anyone questioning it. We've got a question from the audience, and I'm just now, guys, I just want you to know that this person, he doesn't know what the questions that I've been asking. I've asked him to come on and speak about conversion therapy. I think I gave him one sort of question that I might be asking, but as you know, we throw questions at our people, and you know, we choose really great guests who are really strong, and also just bro, thank you so much for your vulnerability and your openness to be able to speak about your journey. I thank you so much for that. That's just absolutely powerful, as thank you. Now, a question from the audience that we do have is, do you believe, now this is related, but it's a bit separate. So it's separate, but it is related to the question about this, what Labour is trying to push upon our people. Do you believe that homosexuality is a learned type of sexual orientation, or is there such a thing as born gay, or what are your thoughts in terms of the occurrence of homosexuality or same-sex attraction?
So, I mean, this is a massive field. There's so much stuff that's been done on this. There's people on both sides of this conversation, both sides, there's experts on both sides. You know, when you hear the media saying stuff like, oh, experts say blah, 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 blah. It's like, yeah, there's also experts that say the complete opposite of that. So which experts are you listening to? Experts, they don't quote the source. The reality is that there seems to be some kinds of biological genes that it's possible, not guaranteed, necessarily, or as far as I know, that to increase your chances of having homosexual attraction, and there's other research that seems to imply that there are lots and lots of correlations between certain types of events in your life, natural nature and environments, which are part of those early developmental stages that result, or that not necessarily result, but are correlated with people who have same-sex attraction. Now, is there scientific methodological proof that certain things cause a certain outcome? No, we don't have that on either side. Just like people can say, there's no evidence to say that certain, or what is it? The Psychological Association, Royal Psychological Association of the UK said something like, there is no sound scientific evidence that sexual orientation can be changed, right? No sound scientific evidence. Yeah, because we don't get this kind of one-size-fits-all situation. When you read that kind of a statement from the Royal College of Psychiatrists, there is no sound scientific evidence that sexual orientation can be changed, or I think they said something else about nurture producing homosexual attraction. You don't really, like, these kinds of statements might make you think that, oh, so it's impossible to change that. But then why, if it's impossible to change that, if you would get that impression from that kind of statement by these people, by these big legitimate psychiatrists organizations, you might think that nobody can change. But then why are there so many examples of people who either move from homosexual to bisexual and then have very happy marriages and children, and are able to manage their same-sex attraction, and they're happy and they're glad for it? And why are there examples of people saying that they move from homosexual to heterosexual? Like, whether they completely eliminate all of their homosexual attraction altogether, that's like, yeah, I don't think there's any proof of that necessarily happening. And then I think the research also says that bisexual people might be able to move one way or the other. So then it's like, well, who fits into that category? Is that like any person who's ever had any heterosexual attraction who was gay for like 5 years and then becomes heterosexual again and says that they have no problem with their same-sex attraction anymore? Were they bisexual, or were they legitimately gay? Like, what is changing your orientation? There's so many questions and so many vagaries that it's so easy to just spin things by saying, well, experts say some phrase that they probably don't even know what they're talking about. Like, not that experts don't know what they're talking about, but the media who present these statements and present these experts without providing sources or whatever often don't know what the statements mean, often don't know the science, but they don't talk about it.
Yeah, I think it's a really big one, actually, yeah, because we do notice that the media, especially the main big media sources, that they do tend to be quite partisan, and they'll only have experts who tend to fit either their narrative, or they seem to be fringe quote-unquote experts on the other side who can be usually easily debunked. So I do notice that definitely comes up.
If they provide the source, yeah, sure.
If they provide source. So bringing it back to this current law that Labour is trying to push, what do you see that is? Do you think that overall this is a good law, or is it a bad law? And what are the sort of the ramifications that you see? Why do you think it's either a good or a bad law to have?
Well, I mean, they haven't written the legislation yet, so it's just an idea right now. Right now, it's just gay conversion therapy is bad. Everyone agrees with that statement. Nobody's using the phrase gay conversion therapy on the side of those who are helping people, coming to them, begging them to help them figure out this confusing attraction they have in themselves, right? No one's using that phrase. So everyone agrees that that phrase is a bad phrase, and people don't like being slandered with it. And the left say it's bad, and they don't explain what it means, and they talk about shock treatment. That's not happening in New Zealand. That probably hasn't happened for decades in many countries. And if it is happening, it's nothing like the terrible stuff that used to happen, and we probably find that stuff repulsive. And if it did happen, you'd see it on the Sunday program. But basically, all we can say is that if they do write the legislation, it's probably going to be as loose and all over the place as most of the other legislation that they seem to write when it comes to cultural issues and like agendas and vague phrases and slogans that they like to push. And it's probably going to be something very similar to what Australia is already pushing, or I think they've already passed it or something, and they're trying to fight back against it. But it's
So
very likely.
what is the Australian? What is the Australian one?
Policy basically says that it's illegal for any person to counsel or help anybody try to change anything about their sexual orientation. So if you're a pastor, or you're a priest, or you're whatever person who just has a different opinion, and your friend comes to you and says, "I'm struggling with this, and I'd like to try and change it a little bit, or try and manage it, or try and maybe have a more normalized, in the clinical sense, heterosexual lifestyle," you can't do that because it would be illegal to help that person. And I wouldn't be surprised if, like, it was possible through that same kind of legislation to prosecute people who even share their opinions in a public sphere, right? Because if you share your opinions in a public space and you start trying to teach publicly, YouTube, or just say your opinion, which is kind of the same stuff that you would teach if you were trying to counsel somebody, you're basically counseling the whole of New Zealand. So therefore, you need to go to jail, because how many people have you suddenly counseled on this matter? Like 50,000 or something? Like,
wow,
it's just crazy.
So if let's play around with this a little bit. So it seems to me that you're saying that now let's take the Christian approach, that if you've got a Christian church or a Hindu temple or a mosque or a religious sort of setting, and you've got someone who is struggling with their same-sex attraction, and they're just wanting the priest or the person, the imam, whatever, to assist them, just say, hey, look, I am having these feelings. Do you mind praying with me or helping me to discuss or helping some counselling through it? You're saying that under the Australian law, which is likely to come here as well, is that illegal to actually engage in?
That's what it seems to be. I mean, I watched a few videos on it. I'm not a super expert, but the way they presented the actual legislation and showed what the actual legislation says, it makes that stuff illegal. You can't counsel people in any capacity to change their sexual orientation. And yeah, that sort of innocent notion of praying with people is this sort of slander of pray the gay away. And that's like, yeah, there's some people who kind of get presented that way. That's not. They might pray and ask that their sexual attractions would decrease or change, right? They're not trying to pray the gay away. It's not a magic trick, right? It's all slander, a lot of the stuff.
And so you're also talking about counselling, aren't you? So I've counselled many youth in terms of suicidality and sexual issues that they've been having, and even down to low self-esteem and self-harm and all that raft of things. You're saying that this particular issue, when people come to someone else as a counsellor and they ask that counsellor for assistance, under the idea of banning, that would be banned. That would be illegal.
Completely. If you look at if we're not that different in the kinds of cultural legislation we would push to Australia, and that Australia has put this legislation through that would make that completely illegal. And there's no doubt that the way that Labour's talking, that they would push something very, very similar that would make it completely illegal. And if you go and watch the Sunday program where they showcased the gay conversion therapy in New Zealand, they showcased all these different types of pretty much Christian communities or religious communities who were providing counseling for those who want to change. And they said that it's possible to change, or people can change. And then what happens is the media then pushes that therapy producer is saying that, oh, you can change, meaning that if you do this and you do it right, you will change, right? Like the media tries to push that people are saying that, but nobody's saying that. People are just saying that people do change and that people have changed and that the research is clear on this. The scientific research that there's a whole heap of people who have changed in many ways exist. There's a website of 150 people who have come out saying that they've changed. I'm not presenting myself as someone who's changed because I will get slandered. I'll get just dismissed. The media doesn't present that side of the conversation. They don't tell you about this website.
What's that 150 in Australia? Sorry, could you clarify that one? What's the 150?
There's a website called Free to Change, is it? Or twoprisms.com. Twoprisms.com is a website that has Australians and New Zealanders on there presenting their own journeys, and you have literally every single possible variation of same-sex attracted people, exclusively homosexual people, and transgender people, all who have changed to not living that lifestyle anymore and living a really happy, managed either heterosexual lifestyle, even if they still have same-sex attraction, just like I still sometimes struggle with same-sex attraction, or are no longer living their transgender lifestyle anymore, and they're quite happy this way, and they've sought their own help and they've changed. And like, for instance, there's a really, really good example of this. There's a person named Rosaria Butterfield, who was a professor of English and women's studies at Syracuse University in New York, was a lesbian with many partners monogamously, and a feminist, right? And she says this, let me read this to you. I considered myself an atheist, having rejected my Catholic childhood and what I perceived to be the superstitions and illogic of the historic Christian faith. I found Christians to be difficult, sour, fearful, and intellectually unengaged people. In addition, since the age of 28, I have lived in monogamous lesbian relationships and politically supported LGBT causes. Now, this lady, she sought out to write a paper about the bigoted, right-wing, crazy, religious people who hate gays and all this sort of stuff. And she asked people to send her information and started studying people. And yes, there were some crazy people who were ignorant and idiotic and call themselves Christians, but are really, really bad Christians, and said all this horrible stuff to her. And there was one couple who said, yeah, we don't agree with your lifestyle, but come and have coffee and dinner with us. And there was like a reverend or something. She went and hung out with them, and she really loved hanging out with them. People who completely disagreed with her stuff and responded to be part of the study. And she eventually ended up deciding to stop pursuing her lesbian relationship, developed heterosexual attraction, got married, had kids. I think her first marriage was really, really terrible, and it went really, really badly. And then she was counseled through that by this couple and continued and had another marriage and had kids with that person. And she's really happily married now. And she goes and talks about this, how she was on the far left, professor of women's studies and feminist and hardcore LGBT, and pushing all this sort of militant agenda that half the LGBT, or whatever proportion of the LGBT community and Labour are pushing. And she's like, actually, you know what? Christians aren't crazy, angry, bigoted people. And actually, the way that they're being treated and the way they're going to be oppressed by this kind of legislation is bigoted itself. And so it's crazy.
That's a powerful testimony to give, and I can actually see in the comments there. Thank you guys for linking us all to two prisons and the name of that person. Thank you so much for helping us by linking that stuff in. That's really wonderful. We're coming to the end of it. Your story is quite powerful, and I do thank you so much for coming on and speaking. I know it can be a real tough thing to do, and I absolutely praise your vulnerability in doing so. So from what I'm picking up, it seems to me that what you're saying is whether someone is living a same-sex life or not, whatever, but that this law, this idea of banning what they're quoting as gay conversion therapy is a bit of a nonsensical term, or at least nonsensical in the way that there's no real. It seems to be a weaponized boogeyman word that doesn't actually have much strength in terms of accuracy. Yeah. So also you mentioned the Sunday article, which does appear to have been very slanted, which seems to be linking towards another boogeyman type of thing. And it is. Can I just say, it's really sad to know that our media is so utterly partisan, so utterly biased. It just really is annoying to have that sort of situation, that scenario.
They present all these ideas, but they never debate anybody. They never present anyone who would debate anybody. Like, they would never respond to a challenge to debate this subject. I could present people, or I could organize people to present really good speakers on the stuff I'm talking about, and you would probably not find a single expert on the other side willing to debate, because they know that they only present things from a certain angle. They don't know how to respond to opposition, and their presentation is almost slanderous. And this term, gay conversion therapy, although not pointed at a single organization, is essentially slandering all the organizations in that documentary that was presented, and this illusion of all Christians. It's just disgusting.
So Tamati Coffee, for all of those people who are out there who keep on smearing out people about the whole quote-unquote gay conversion therapy, you're being called out. You're absolutely being called out. You want to have a debate? No worries. Get in touch. I will make it happen. The brother here, we will be able to sort something out for you. We'll be able to get a debate. but don't try hiding behind weaponized words and boogeyman type of scenarios, especially when you guys are the ones dealing in authoritarianism and ideological crippling of free speech. So, brother, you've got another, I'll give you a minute. What would you like our people out there to know about the labor law that's being pushed out there, or anything at all? I'll give you the last minute to have the word there. Go for it.
I mean, I feel like I've said a lot. I just wish that people would, if Labor's going to push some law or push some agenda, or the media's going to push some agenda, at least front up to a conversation on the other side. Otherwise, they're full of it. I'm going to send some links through to Elliot, and hopefully he'll provide those links for people to do their own research. But it's not hard to find research contrary to what Labor's pushing. And when people use vague terms, just don't buy into it. It's just a smoke screen, so that they can push this agenda that's going to oppress a whole bunch of LGBT people.
That is, and you know what? That is so fascinating too. That it's not so much. It's trying to suppress not just those who are counseling people for seeking help, but that it's actually suppressing the voices of those of the LGBT community themselves who might want to find out and explore more about who they are, and maybe if they want to sort of live in a different space of what they're living in. It's absolutely incredible. So for all of you out there, thank you so much for listening in to our guest, to our bro. Thank you so much, bro. It's been awesome to be able to speak with you. It's absolutely wonderful. And can I just say also, in terms of New Conservative, we believe in two genders. We say that science is actually the one that we go by. So we would also say that leave children alone. You can see on some of our links, we've just seen that children are starting to go through some drag kid periods, and that's through the Kia Kids, and I'm popping up those lines. So just today, they are starting to bring in drag musicals for children, and they've just done a big drag queen makeover for an 11-year-old. That's something that we'll be reporting on really soon. That's just come out today, and they've also got 11-year-old children reporting on that. So the absolute inculcation of these sort of ideologies are being pushed upon your children right now, and we're going to make it sure that everyone knows about this, because leave our children alone, allow people free speech, allow people to be able to explore their own lives. If they want counseling for anything, allow them to get that counseling. Don't suppress people on any side in order for them to engage in the counseling that they want to engage in. So for our last call for us, thank you so much, brother. We really appreciate it. I really appreciate what you've said tonight. And for you out there, we'll see you soon, real soon. And in the meantime, God bless you, and God bless New Zealand.
I love being part of the front line. I love being a part of Takanini. I grew up in East Auckland. I have lived through multiple broken homes. I contain the ethnicities of Niue, Tonga, of England, Aotearoa Ngāti Raukawa. I'm proud of every single one of my links. I love both my parents. I love the fact that I've got a wife who is of Chinese ethnicity. I eat mostly Chinese food, proper Chinese food. My kids are multiple ethnicities. And that's one of the wonderful things about Takanini. There's such an amazing diversity here.